Well, here to delve into all things generative AI from content marketing company Skyward are the wonderful Dan Baptiste, SVP of Strategy and Brand Partnerships, and Casey Noble, who's the head of content. Dan, Casey, welcome. Great to have you here. How are you doing?
Doing
Great.
well. How are you doing,
Yeah.
Jake?
Oh, I'm great. Thank you so much for asking. All the better for seeing you both here. Now, we asked that all-important poll whether people were feeling pressure to deliver on ChatGPT, and those poll results are ready. Let's see what the audience thought. Wow, okay, 68% saying no. Now, what we don't know is whether that means they are leveraging it or not. So please do get in touch with us with more information about how ChatGPT is fitting in to your organization's plan. But for now, Dan, Casey, 68% saying no. There's 68%, saying no. There's no pressure to use ChatGPT. Does that surprise you?
It surprises me a little bit, and I wonder if maybe there might not be the business pressure at this point yet, but I think there might be personal curiosity, certainly from most of the marketers that we're talking to. I don't know, what do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I think to use it, maybe that is the language is there, but I think to understand it and how it applies and where the dangers are, it seems to be universal, and it's kind of cascaded into even our personal lives, which is this moment that we're in. So it's certainly an interesting moment to be alive and be in business. So yeah, it's interesting for sure.
And Dan, interesting you say that. Somebody has written in saying they selected no because they're not feeling pressure from the business, but they are feeling pressure personally. So you kind of hit the nail on the head there. All right, well, I know that you both have absolutely loads to get through today. We're going to load up your slides. And just before Dan and Casey take things away, a quick reminder, yes, do get your questions in. I'll be facilitating those in just a moment. But for now, Casey, I believe you're going to kick us off, so please do take it away.
Yeah. So, hi, everybody. Excited to be here. Dan and I are coming in today to talk about how to think about generative AI like ChatGPT and really how you can think about using it to drive competitive advantage. So, whether you're familiar with the technology or not, I think making sense of its implications for marketing really starts with asking ourselves, why is everybody so excited about it in the first place? Why did it sort of set the marketing industry in particular on fire when it came out? And I think that one reason is that we've been talking for a really long time as an industry about how we have to change the way we create and deploy content, right? But ChatGPT sort of came in and threw down the gauntlet. So when we're talking to marketers, we're seeing them just wowed by the technology, how far it's advanced, and it's to the point where it can really help us set a new course for content creation in marketing. And there's really no way, I think, that we can go back to doing things exactly the way we were doing them before. But we have to think really carefully about how we deploy it at the same time, because we're marketing in an era when the economics of supply and demand are really working against us, and it's only getting worse. So even before the pandemic, it was estimated that the amount of content online was doubling every 9 to 24 months. And that was a pre-pandemic estimate. So it's really clear by now that if we're playing into a content commoditization game or competing on publishing volume, that's going to be a losing position to take. So what we're actually competing on today is the quality of our brand experiences in total. And buyers are telling us that. 88% of buyers have said that brand experience is as important to them as our products and services, as important as our products and services. And according to Gartner, the main driver of purchase decisions isn't brand love anymore. It's really customer agency. So what's more important than how customers feel about your brand is really how much you're empowering them to actively engage with your brand experience. And we're doing that mostly through content, right? So the premise here is that you're not going to gain market advantage by simply creating more content faster and blasting it to every corner of the internet and thinking about generative AI as a way to sort of like do that. You have to put your energy into really carving out authority in the areas where your brand adds the most value and using content to develop a total brand experience that's differentiated, that's immersive, that's personalized to your target customers. These are all the things that we're talking about today in marketing. But there's also a really powerful internal reality, I think, at play here. And that's that a lot of marketers that we talk to are hyped up about the possibilities of generative AI, really because they're just exhausted. Exhausted from, battling to keep up with the number of channels and audiences that they're serving, from fighting internal bottlenecks, from serving teams across the organization who are looking for marketing and looking at marketing as an order fulfillment center instead of really a business driver. And so overwhelmingly, we're encountering marketing teams that are so heads down and focused on feeding channels that they've stopped asking, if what they're really publishing actually matters to their customers. And so we call that production without purpose. And when you're sort of in that mindset and feeling, like you might as well be throwing your content into that ultra massive black hole that's all over the news right now, of course, it's tempting to start thinking of generative AI as sort of that silver bullet, that's going to solve all the problems, that's going to take the lift, the load off of content creation for your team. But we have to remember here that publishing is not victory. So don't make the mistake of looking at this technology as an opportunity to sort of like churn out more and more and more of the same content and just do that at less cost, or just to win in search. If you do, you're really going to kind of be left in the dust, because we should be challenging ourselves, and brands out there are challenging themselves to really think about how to use generative AI to create new types of content, to transform their processes entirely from passive publishing and passive content creation to something much more active and alive and vibrant. So moving from delivering, asset by asset to using generative AI first to create a nucleus of really original industry leading content, and then using AI to atomize and scale that content across your personas, across your formats, across your channels. So just as a little background, we really started our journey with generative AI because, like a lot of you probably, we were doing the good work of full funnel content creation through human beings. And we knew that wouldn't be sustainable for most of our brand clients. So just as an example, with brands like Samsung, we do all the work to, identify audience challenges, where we're mapping those to value props, working with SMEs to sort of distill those into industry specific content, then, recreating that and generating different formats for every stage and channel in the customer journey, and then segmenting that by persona. And so an approach like this, it looks great on paper, the results were there, but it is a major undertaking. And as we've seen in more recent years, this kind of, strategy and approach, it really starts to break down when you need more speed and you need the agility to pivot when something like a global pandemic or a major economic downturn has you having to shift gears and shift your strategy sort of across the board. Then you have to stop the machine and kind of reset again. So this is a gateway into a new way to approach agility. So flashback to a year ago, we were asking ourselves if generative AI could be the solution, right? We wanted to find the best possible way to take all the benefits of human creativity, human expertise, and scale that with AI. So we started out working with really an off-the-shelf natural language model. What we were doing was training it in-house with a huge library of original human-generated content that had been vetted for quality and accuracy. And then, we're in that process and boom, ChatGPT hits the market, and suddenly we have access to this large language model. It's beautifully fluent, it's pre-trained on a massive data set, and it seems like it can sort of do everything we aspired to do right off the bat. So we dove in, we hooked it up to our API, and we were using GPT-3. And so for those that don't know, that's really the large language model that ChatGPT is based on. ChatGPT is the chat interface. GPT-3 is the base model. So we were using a version of GPT-3, and we started wrestling with it and testing its limitations. And so what I want to share with you is some of what we learned in that process. And first is that generative AI is really not the silver bullet at least for right now. And by that, I mean, a lot of people mistakenly think of it as sort of a software version of Rosie Jetson. Because it's so fluid, you expect it to answer questions accurately, to sort of engage with you the way that, you engage with search engines, for it to know exactly what to do in any scenario that you give it, and sort of fetch the most accurate answer that it can find. But the reality is that large language models like GPT-3, by definition, are trained on massive amounts of text. And so what they're really there to do is learn from the patterns and relationships between just letters and words, and then use that to mimic human communication. That's it. So it responds like a human, but it's really acting more like a ventriloquist dummy when you think about it. And that makes it a poor total replacement for human creators if you start thinking about it that way. And so there's a few reasons why. One is you really can't rely on it for trustworthy and original insights. So it's trained to respond. It's not trained to fact check or cross reference materials or cite sources. So you ask it a question, it very well might make up an answer that sounds completely plausible and present that back as fact. It doesn't self regulate, it doesn't make critical judgments about the information that's trained on. So if there's inherent bias, or there's misinformation within the data set it's trained on, it's really likely to generate content that reinforces those sorts of inaccuracies in its responses. You also don't want to rely on it for predictions, for advice, for recommendations, because the algorithm can't apply critical thinking. It's not evaluating risk. It doesn't have real life experience to bring to bear in that sort of conversation or application. So there are predictive AI models that do exist if you're interested in that type of application, but they're sort of an entirely different area of machine learning. It's not what you're dealing with if you're working with generative AI in general. So just something to know. And not to mention, its knowledge of the world is really limited to that data set it was trained on. So, for example, GPT-3 has no knowledge of current events past 2021 because it was only trained on data up to that point in time. You also don't want to expect it to come up with, novel ideas or completely original points of view. Again, because everything it generates is based on what already exists, it's always going to sort of default to the most plausible. And that often means the most generic result. So usually what you're getting is an initial generic output. And then with something like ChatGPT, if you've messed around with it, you're prompting it and prompting it and prompting it to get what you need out of it. So if you're really eyeing it for brand content creation, you as a brand, you can't expect it to understand and really adopt your specific brand tone and voice, to know how you like to speak to your target audience without a lot of prompting and guidance coming into play there. And so you can spend, a lot of time and just the same amount of time, if not more, actually prompting the AI into revising and delivering the output that you want, as you could just creating the content from scratch. So one reason why it hasn't yet necessarily caught on is like the de facto workflow solution for internal content creation, even if you're creating all of your content internally. The efficiency is just not there yet. So all that said, anytime AI is being used to create, substantive content from scratch, human oversight, editing, fact checking are really essential to ensure the quality and the accuracy of the content that's being put out there, that's being generated. So you want to check everything before it's published if you are planning to use it for content creation applications. What we actually found works really well is when you feed it the original ideas to start with. So you give it some kind of source material, and then you give it really specific guidance on what to do with that information. So what we've done is really spend time perfecting a prompt architecture in our platform that allows us to steer the AI into performing specific content related tasks based on specific kinds of source material. And so what we know it's really good at are tasks like analyzing text and distilling that into, key insights or talking points. It can take a topic and generate related topics or ideas. It can turn ideas or notes into fleshed out assignment summaries for creators. Its understanding of content formats and its ability to sort of mimic specific writing styles means that it can help you quickly reformat content for cross-channel amplification. So things like giving it a blog post and having it turn that into social copy or email blurbs, or even a video storyboard or an infographic outline. So with the right prompts, we can rewrite existing content, we can reformat existing content, and we can adapt it into styles and tones that are better suited to specific personas. And then it can make suggestions or generate additional options based on the parameters that you give it. So think of applications like, having it describe the specific type of image that you need to use with your copy, giving you additional headline variations, or doing some basic, narrow copywriting or punching up copy. These are all applications that we've got deployed in a prompt library right now, and we're using with actual brands to help them build out their own content ecosystem, starting from original sources, long form assets, and then scaling those for personas and different formats across channels. And so I want to turn it over to Dan to really talk about that in more detail, our approach and how it all comes together in practice with some actual brands.
Thanks, Casey. You mentioned approach, which is important because a couple of the key principles we started out with, the importance of a brand position and a brand experience, and this looming black hole that we have where content kind of floats out, never to be seen again. Those are two kind of major challenges. So, as we started off looking at this technology, in addition, we took a hard look at our philosophy and said, okay, if we're going to create brands that matter, how do we tell stories that matter, right? And I think if you look at the volume and the kind of chase of asset by asset by asset and the demands that the business is putting on, where lines of business are raising their hand, hey, I need this asset for this purpose. And then, we're chasing search opportunities. And all of a sudden we get into this production cycle, as Casey called it, production without purpose. And you essentially lose your sense of purpose. And how do we shape the market in a way that actually starts to deliver on why you exist versus the products and services? So to give an analogy here, if you think of that production room mentality, it's almost like you're operating a newsroom where you're trying to create content within a cycle as fast as possible, as quick as possible, so you can be present. That publisher mindset is right from what our lens is, but I think the lens could be shifted. So if you take another oversimplified analogy and you think of how, let's say, like a magazine operates, and you think of the role it plays, where you can start to have a point of view in the world, you have repeatable structures and formats, people come to you to learn. And oh, by the way, you have an annual calendar that starts to plot out the major things that you have to say throughout the year from a topic standpoint. And ideally, when you can put that in place, the stories become really important and the angles become really important. So we kind of took a step back and said, how can we kind of borrow some of those principles in a modern application and find ways to bring generative AI or technology like it into the fold? So I'll give you a real example. We work with a large global healthcare company. Their purpose isn't to sell, healthcare software and technology and products. They have a really big, ambitious goal of changing the world and changing healthcare. And to do that, they can't do that through transactions, right? So they have to understand what are the care teams on the ground? What is, what is this kind of universe of care? And it's really care teams, hospital administrators, and folks who are making a lot of the decisions, patients. So each one of those has their own challenges. So kind of a cheat code here is if you can understand the future state that you're trying to create, and you think of all of the barriers, the big barriers to that future state for your audiences, that's a really easy way to think about the themes and topics that you have to overcome so that your products and solutions have value in driving kind of real transformation. So for this organization, sorry, I tried. The themes became important, right? So as you're thinking of some of the major challenges in healthcare, None of these should be super surprising. There's labor shortage and staff burnout, the rising cost of care, complexity within how care is delivered, and even surgeries that are taking place that weren't taking place years ago, and data overload and demand. And COVID kind of threw a wrench in here. And even some of the emerging topics of pushing people from hospitals to home care. Those are all major themes that are putting pressure and stress cracks on the foundation of healthcare in general. So if this client can start to understand those challenges and really have a point of view on how to overcome those challenges for each of those audiences, and have empathy and understanding and tell that story on a global scale, and then do that month over month over month with different stories, and really take a position on changing the world when it comes to healthcare, that's a really powerful position for a brand to kind of put their flag in. So here you're seeing an example of what is a little bit of a framework as we're thinking about the role of point of view driven storytelling, generative AI, atomization, and scale. So this top kind of blue bar, if I'm not colorblind, I think that's blue, is all about what Casey referred to as the source material. So we all have material like this. So you might have research reports, you might have SMEs kind of tucked in internally, maybe you have white papers. So we have some of this thinking kind of on the shelf, but it's not enough. So you have to build it out and even look at the source material that went into some of those polished assets. So if there's a video, what are the B-roll? What are the additional interviews? Where's all the context? And starting to really provide point of view, expertise, and data points that can be used as source material for further atomization and generative AI for content creation. So once you really kind of nail, in this case, data overload, what is the root cause of it? Why is it a problem? What do people need to do about it? How does it matter for different stakeholders? And how does that change when we look at different regions and countries and markets around the world? So when you can start answering those questions and capturing those answers, then you can start building a framework of all of the different channels and formats and assets. Like, how do I pull this story and all this rich data and insights into meaningful content that I can put out into the world? So that next layer, once you build that infrastructure on top of systems like ChatGPT or other generative AI, now the magic starts to happen, right? So I've done, I give this analogy: if you're painting, the job is easy if you do all the prep work, right? So this is the prep, the taping, the sanding. You're getting everything ready so you can hit that button, right? So here we understand all of the different ways we can pull unique assets out of this really rich POV-driven, brand unique, specific material. Now let's bring it out to the world in formats that are really rich, unique, and interesting. As Casey mentioned, having two kind of folks looking at this before you do anything with it, because you can hit a button and all of your derivative assets are generated literally in seconds, and I'll show you some examples of that. But you want to have a couple of lenses here. So one is an editorial lens. So does it read well? Is it brand aligned? Do we have the right voice and tone? Is it good? All of those questions. And then the level of expertise to say, hey, is it accurate? So it should be, because it's drafted off, but you never want to make that assumption, especially, a lot of the clients we work with and a lot of yourselves are, working at large brands, and you can't afford to put stuff out in the world that isn't accurate, isn't true, and isn't good. So once you kind of nail that layer, the next kind of layer of magic happens, which is hitting another button and personalizing it for audiences, for industries, for segments, for use cases and formats. So now, we work with folks like this healthcare example that are in regulated industries to imagine that you could have all of this connected content and storytelling that's dimensionalized for products and ready to push out in your channels, and in a format that can be delivered from an account-based marketing standpoint. It's really exciting because now the source asset goes through, or the source content goes through rigorous reviews to make sure it's true, which makes all of the reviews of this secondary content that much easier, which is really, really exciting when we think of regulated industries. So now if you look at this model and where you're spending your time, it's really, yesterday, we were in the bottom two buckets, just grinding it out, right? We're chasing asset by asset by asset. And we talked about production without purpose. It's easy to fall into that when you're so overloaded and overwhelmed with production. Today, now we can look at that allegedly blue box at the top and spend our time really thinking about the story and the narrative and why it matters and who it matters to. And then when you get down to bringing it out into the world, the nuance of bringing it to audiences and channels and personas and all the stuff that's been out of reach because it requires so much effort and time and money is now within reach, which is really, really exciting. So now if we can imagine us doing this on a regular basis, what your library looks like and what your world looks like and where you're spending your time is really, really exciting. So if we kind of look at some real examples here, this is GAF, which is a roofing and shingle company. They have a sustainability report. So not unlike a lot of us, sustainability is really important to them. They have different audiences. So roofers, their retail partners, people in the community that they need support of. So lots of different ways that sustainability goes up. So if we took this long report that was produced for a mass audience, now can we start to deliver suites of assets around it? So this is an example of a PR or comm suite. So the AI, generative AI engine took the key concepts from this report, created a press release that can create talking points, it can create FAQs, it can create memos and customer letters. And so as we're thinking of the key concepts and bring them to life, like the idea that, if you do that upfront prep work, so to speak, that button press is really, really exciting. You can also start to take the key concepts and tease those out into formats that are aligned to your different personas. So, I mentioned a few of them there. Why does this information matter to what audiences and how do we bring it to the world? If we look at a couple other quick examples, this is an example from Abbott. So they have a team called Virus Hunters. So they're out looking for, unfortunately, the next pandemic and trying to prevent it. So this was, I think, last year. I've lost sense of time. So 2022, whenever that was, monkeypox popped up, and there was a lot of nervous energy around that. So they wrote a piece from their experts on what it is and how to understand it. Obviously, with the level of anxiety around, especially at that time, around some of these viruses and issues, one piece just isn't going to change the world. So we said, what else could we do with this information? So the first ask was, could you turn it into infographic copy? So here, it took the key concepts, wrote an outline. It recommended breaking it into 7 steps. There's design cues, there's copy, and there's calls to action and everything. So it's just wild. So these concepts existed, but this format did not. So it's pulling out key concepts and it knows how to formulate them in this way and then delivering it again in seconds, which is just kind of mind bending here. So today we would hand this to a designer. In months, not years, there's going to be downstream systems that can actually create this content. Same thing here with video copy and storyboards. If we're thinking of social copy. So all these things that we were creating manually, now we have the opportunity, if we're doing the upfront work well and we have the right source material, to scale downstream really quickly. Additionally, things like newsletter blurbs and quick summaries. If we take something like a video and take the transcript of the video, now, even though it's in a transcript format, could I tease out those key concepts and then deliver surrounding assets, both written, visual? So now you're creating suites, not just segmented content. Oh, this is our video strategy. And over here, we have our website strategy. Now you can start to tie things together in seamless ways as well. The last example here before we open up to questions is if we wanted to use this tool set in another way, which is pretend that I am a journalist and I'm about to interview a subject matter expert on infectious disease. So infectious disease surveillance, what should I be talking about? So the first example here are clusters of themes and topics and connected assets and even in keyword sets here to recommend how to go about that. But even more exciting is what are the burning questions? So here's 15 questions that it generated based on the prompt structure and the instructions that I gave it and some of the source material to actually tell me what are the ways I could structure this this interview set. And oh, by the way, when I get answers to each of those 15 questions, those become my source material that feeds the engine on the back end. And as you can imagine, it gets really, really exciting to start spending our time on some of the higher level thinking and what Casey mentioned, that kind of human creativity and insights and expertise, and kind of pulling that out of the organization and being able to scale that for purpose. So as I take a breath here, as we think of kind of summarizing here, one is it all starts with purpose. What value do you bring to the world? Not, we've kind of moved beyond just hardcore product feature set marketing. We're starting to show what value and what journey do we bring our customers on. Really starting to think of then going downstream and having rich source material that's comprehensive enough, AI plus human beings to atomize and generate content for purpose downstream. Always have an editor, always have an expert kind of reviewing the content, and then go out and scale and win. So we'll open up for questions.
Wow, fascinating stuff. Thank you so much, both. I tell you what, I have learned an awful lot already. So in a nutshell, you need to have your content in a good place before you can start applying AI. This is pretty much the case across the board when we look at different industries trying to leverage AI. You can't just jump on it in a desperate bid to fix things. But what would you say then to people who think, oh, well, we're desperate for content, we need something, let's just chuck something into ChatGPT and see if it works? Do you think that's an option for somebody who really is desperate for content output?
My first reaction is anxiety and panic. I mean, if you look at some of the things that Casey referenced, is there's no relationship with the truth. There's no subject matter comprehension. There's no point of view. So then the question is, what value does that content bring to the world? I think instead, if you spent your time, thinking about the storyline and why it matters, and as a brand, why you're bringing it to, out into the world, and then you use ChatGPT to scale, not create. For us, that in our learnings, that is what we would recommend.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I do think that, it's proving to be a valuable assistive tool for, writers and creators out there. So a lot of writers are using it. Before ChatGPT came out, they were using, similar technologies to sort of assist the writing process, whether it's taking notes and then organizing them or helping to generate a first draft. It's good in that sort of assistive way. But when you're looking at it and deploying, as a brand with a full content program and scale to consider, it's just not going to give you the efficiency that you need to be working in flow, with ChatGPT as an assistant in that way. It's not going to deliver the efficiency or I think the scale that you need to make a transformational impact within the organization. It would basically be like kind of deploying, giving all of your internal content creators like Grammarly, to work with, for instance. There's an efficiency, aspect to it. But at the end of the day, unless you've got a systematized sort of tool and way of interfacing with the language model that works for your brand and is controlled and guided, those are the things that are going to create the big time transformational kind of impacts to the production process.
All right, thank you both. Well, we do have an audience question for you. We're going to be bringing up Carolyn Allen, who is from the OTIP group of companies. Carolyn, welcome to the stage. What's your question?
Hi, so I am just learning really about generative AI, and it sounds very much like the operating model efficiencies and scale that can be gained is really helpful. And you both commented on how important it is to help guide the AI and be planful. My original question was actually about, can it then be leveraged for targeted relevant content? But towards the end, you tackled that. So my new question is that, how do we make the leap, or can you provide some guidance on where a good starting place would be? Because we spent the last few years diving deep into our personas and getting very targeted and very personalized. So how do we take all of that or evolve that to the next step if we did want to apply the generative AI?
Yeah, I can go, Casey. Yeah. One, I think the persona work is really important for a couple reasons. One is not only to say, can you adjust this content for this persona, but there's the psychographics as well. So in that healthcare example, maybe you're going after cardiologists, but you're going after cardiologists who want to be innovative but are managing costs. And how does this topic then apply to that life circumstance, right? So the persona work really helps. And then as you're thinking of delivering some of the source material, then I assume where Casey would go is like the prompt structure, and what you ask of it is also kind of an art form, and it's really important. So what we did was put an infrastructure layer kind of on top where the generative AI is kind of running in the back, but we have consistent prompts for different use cases, because to try to do this one every time the first time, you start to lose a lot of your efficiencies. But from a, hey, proof of concept, could I take a piece and adjust it for a really specific use case? Testing that is really interesting. And you might say, hey, there's something here. It does a lot of the heavy lifting. So then we can sit on top of that work and just really polish it and tighten it up. So there's ways you can test, and we're happy to kind of guide you on that, outside of this effort. But Casey, I don't know if you have more than that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. The persona work is great that you guys have put focus there, and that's foundational work for all of the content planning. Anyways, that you can sort of map out. What are these pockets that you need to fill? What are the formats that we want personalized? That's important for us to personalize, and what sort of applies across the board, right? As people move through your digital journey, if that's where you're specifically focused. I would say, for starting out, I would recommend using generative AI specifically for sort of your later stage distribution content when it comes to using it for personalization. As you get into sort of the middle layer, let's say where you have a research report and you're looking to sort of take insights from that and build out several different related blog posts, that you can publish and point back to your research report and have versions of those posts that are, personalized for different audiences. That's where context, right? The personalization, it's as much about the pieces of information that are most relevant to this audience versus this audience, rather than just like a change or inflection in tone or style or like a way of referring to something, right? It's much more substantive, the difference there. So I would start by keeping focused on personalizing more manually at that critical level. But then when you get into creating email copy, when you get into creating some of those distribution assets, it's very easy, and we're happy to talk to you about it with a not necessarily easy. There's definitely an art to it, but once you have kind of clicked in, it's very good at consistently generating great results for things like distribution copy with the right sort of tonal indicators and persona indicators. You just have to kind of learn how to speak its language that way.
Amazing stuff. Thank you both so much. Carolyn, thanks for your question. I really hope that helps you on your journey. And Casey and Dan, that's just about all we've got time for. Thank you. I had so many questions for you, but I'm going to pick your brains after, if that's okay. So much to learn.
Yeah,
and I wanted to leave you with this one. A friend of mine actually used ChatGPT to write her wedding vows. Your quick reactions to that one? Do you think that's a good idea?
I don't know if that's true love. I don't know. I don't know how to feel about that one.
Maybe one day.
That's bold. I wish I would have thought about it. I stayed up all night.
Well, Well, there you go. If any of you have any important pieces of writing to do for your significant other, there you go. ChatGPT might be the way. Once again, Dan, Casey, thank you so much for being
Thanks,
here.
Jade.
Much appreciated. Take care. And
All right, you as well.